Hey guys, tonight we're ditching the history books filled with heroic poses and shiny armor, and diving headfirst into the gritty, smelly, and frankly quite painful reality of being a medieval knight. Forget those fairy tales your grandma read you, the ones where valiant heroes rescue damsels with perfectly blow-dried hair. The truth is, you, with your modern sensibilities and appreciation for things like, not dying of dysentery probably wouldn't last a single day. So before you get too cozy imagining yourself jousting for glory, take a moment to like this video, hit that subscribe button, but only if you genuinely appreciate the brutal honesty we serve up here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from and what ungodly hour it is. It's always fascinating to see which corners of the globe are ready for a dose of historical disillusionment. Now, dim those lights, maybe crank up a fan to simulate the constant draft of a medieval castle, and let's embark on this charming journey into why your nightly dreams are about to get a serious reality check. Congratulations, you've just woken up. Or, more accurately, you've been startled into consciousness by a combination of freezing air, the sound of rats quarreling over a discarded bone, and the dulcet tones of Sir Reginald in the next straw pallet loudly expelling last night's ale-soaked flatulence. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a lumpy sack stuffed with straw that's seen better centuries and now hosts a thriving ecosystem of fleas, lice, and other uninvited bedfellows who consider your skin their personal all-you-can-eat buffet. There's no snooze button on this medieval alarm clock, just the chilling realization that the thin will blanket you're clutching like a life raft offers about as much protection from the pre-dawn chill as a single sheet of parchment. You try to stretch, but your joints scream in protest. You're probably in your early 20s, but your body feels like it's auditioning for a role in a crypt. The air in your shared chamber, because privacy is a concept yet to be invented for anyone below the rank of king, smells like a potent cocktail of unwashed bodies, damp stone, stale beer, and something vaguely cheesy that you sincerely hope isn't decomposing armor padding. You swing your legs over the side of your pallet, and your bare feet meet a floor that's either stone cold, damp from the morning mist seeping through the arrow slits they laughably call windows, or sticky from whatever Sir Percival spilled during his midnight stumble. Good morning, sunshine, or, rather, good morning, gloom, because actual sunshine is still a few hours of shivering away. Your first task? Relieving yourself. Don't go looking for a gleaming porcelain throne or even a semi-private outhouse. You'll be lucky if there's a designated chamber pot in the corner, already brimming with the contributions of your knightly brethren. More likely, it's a quick trip to a garderobe, essentially a stone chute that deposits your offerings directly into the moat or onto the unfortunate ground below. Try not to think about the splashback, or the fact that this is also where enemy archers sometimes get very creative during sieges. Hygiene, you ask? That's a quaint modern notion. Washing your face might involve a splash of icy water from a communal basin, water that was probably fetched by a serf an hour ago and is already teeming with interesting microbial life. Soap? A luxury. Dental care? You might chew on a twig if you're feeling fancy, or rinse your mouth with wine, which probably just gives the bacteria a lovely alcoholic marinade. Your breath could likely fell a small dragon at 50 paces, but don't worry, so could everyone else's. Breakfast is next, a hearty affair designed to fuel a day of, well, we'll get to that. Expect a hunk of dense, coarse bread that could double as a weapon, maybe some pottage, a kind of medieval mystery stew that's been simmering since the last crusade, and a generous glug of weak ale, because the water is a gamble your intestines aren't willing to take. Forget your artisanal coffee or your avocado toast. This is survival fuel, gritty and unglamorous. As you choke down your medieval power bar, you're surrounded by the sights and sounds of a castle stirring to life. Dogs bark, squires rush about, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer reminds you that your day of supposed glory is about to begin. But first you have to get dressed. And that, my friend, is where the real nightmare starts. You thought your morning so far was a medieval horror show? Buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to enter the world of nightly fashion, and it's less runway chic and more mobile torture device. Getting dressed for a night isn't a simple matter of pulling on a t-shirt and jeans. Oh no, this is a full-body commitment, a laborious ritual that requires assistance, patience, and a complete disregard for personal comfort. First comes the undergarment, a linen or wool gambeson, which is basically a padded jacket designed to prevent your expensive armor from rubbing your skin raw. Spoiler alert, it doesn't entirely succeed. This garment alone is thick, heavy, and in the summer, turns your torso into a personal sauna. Imagine wearing a quilted duvet on a hot day, and you're halfway there. Next, if you're particularly unlucky or about to engage in something more dangerous than glaring at the French, come the male chausse for your legs and a male hauberk for your torso. We're talking about tens of thousands of tiny, interlinked iron rings. It's like wearing a 50-pound metal sweater. It's cold in the winter, searing in the summer, and constantly whispering sweet nothings about rust and chafing into your ear. Lifting your arms is an achievement. Bending over is a strategic maneuver requiring advanced planning. And if a single ring breaks, well, enjoy that little metal splinter working its way into your tender bits. But wait, there's more. Now for the plate armor, the shiny stuff you see in museums. This isn't a one-piece superhero suit. It's a complex jigsaw puzzle of greaves for your shins, cuisses for your thighs, polions for your knees, vambraces for your forearms, couters for your elbows, spalders for your shoulders, and a breastplate and backplate that encase your torso like a very unforgiving clamshell. Each piece has to be strapped, buckled, or riveted into place, a process that can take well over an hour and requires at least one, probably two very patient and strong squires. These aren't your personal assistants. They're overworked teenagers who are probably cursing your noble lineage under their breath as they wrestle with stiff leather straps and uncooperative buckles. And you better hope they fasten everything correctly, because a loose piece of armor in battle is an open invitation for a sword, arrow, or mace to say hello to your internal organs. The helmet, or helm, is the cherry on top of this metallic sundae of suffering. Whether it's a great helm that turns your head into an oven with limited visibility or a bassinet with a visor that steams up faster than a sauna, it's going to be hot, claustrophobic, and will significantly impair your ability to see, hear, and breathe. Peripheral vision, a distant memory, trying to hear commands over the din of battle? Good luck. And the smell? After a few hours of sweating inside that metal bucket, it's a unique blend of old gym socks, rust, and existential dread. All told, you're now wearing anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds of assorted metal, leather, and padding. Walking is a clanking, laborious effort. Running is a near impossibility. Getting up if you fall is a group project. And if nature calls urgently while you're fully kitted out, let's just say it involves a lot of frantic unbuckling and a profound sense of despair. So there you are, a magnificent, gleaming tower of iron and inconvenience, ready to face the day. You look impressive, sure, but inside that shiny exterior, you're already overheating, chafing in places you didn't know existed, and wondering if this whole nightly gig was really worth the hype. And you haven't even seen a horse yet. Congratulations, you're a walking, clanking, overheating tin can. Now, about that noble steed you've seen in all the tapestries. The majestic warhorse that's supposed to carry you fearlessly into battle while looking like it just stepped out of a shampoo commercial. Let's puncture that particular fantasy bubble with the sharp point of reality. Shall we? Your average medieval warhorse, or destrier, wasn't some ethereal, prancing creature. It was a hefty, powerful, and often quite grumpy animal, bred for strength and endurance, not for its charming personality or its ability to understand your existential angst. Think less unicorn's cousin, and more small, furry tank with a bad attitude. And this tank smells. Oh, does it smell? Horses, bless their four-legged hearts, are not known for their delicate aroma, and a warhorse, constantly sweating under its own barding, armor for horses, because why should you be the only one suffering? And the general grime of medieval life carries a perfume that can only be described as Eau de Barnyard Apocalypse. Getting on this magnificent beast while you're encased in 100 pounds of your own personal Iron Maiden is an athletic feat in itself. There's no elegant leg swing here. You'll likely need a mounting block, or a couple of sturdy squires to hoist your metal-clad posterior into the saddle. And the saddle? Not some plush, ergonomic wonder. It's a high-backed, wooden contraption designed to keep you from sliding off when a peasant with a pointy stick tries to unseat you. which means it's also perfectly designed to ram into your groin with every sudden movement. Once you're up there, you're essentially a human G-force experiment. Controlling a powerful, often agitated warhorse with reins while your hands are encased in metal gauntlets and your vision is restricted by a helmet slit requires a level of equestrian skill that makes Olympic dressage look like a pony ride. Your legs, encased in greaves and cuisses, are stiff, making subtle cues nearly impossible. You're relying on brute strength, years of practice, and a silent prayer that your horse doesn't decide today is a good day to have an existential crisis and lie down in the middle of the battlefield. And these horses weren't cheap. A good destrier could cost as much as a small farm. Losing one in battle wasn't just a tactical disadvantage. It was a crippling financial blow. So you're not just riding a horse. You're riding your retirement fund, your status symbol, and your best chance of not becoming a heavily armored pedestrian in a very unfriendly neighborhood. Let's not forget the joys of horse maintenance. Feeding, watering, grooming, and mucking out stalls were primarily the squire's jobs. But you, as the knight, were ultimately responsible for your mount's well-being. A lame or sick horse was a useless horse, and in a world without modern veterinary medicine, keeping your warhorse healthy was a constant battle against disease, injury, and sheer bad luck. So, as you sit atop your fragrant, formidable, and financially ruinous steed, remember that this isn't just a mode of transportation. It's a partnership forged in sweat, steel, and the ever-present aroma of impending doom. You're not just a knight. You're a heavily armed, poorly ventilated equestrian with a very expensive, very smelly, and very vital coworker. Enjoy the ride if you can feel your legs anymore. Now that you're uncomfortably perched atop your fragrant warbeast, a gleaming beacon of metallic misery, you might think your day involves heroic quests or rescuing fair maidens. Wrong again. Most of your waking hours, when you're not actively trying to kill someone or being killed yourself, are spent in training. And medieval knightly training wasn't some gentleman's sport. It was a brutal, relentless grind designed to turn you from a clumsy oaf in armor into a slightly less clumsy oaf in armor who could maybe survive a pointy stick to the face. Your day likely starts with weapons practice. Forget the elegant swordplay you've seen in movies, with graceful parries and witty banter. This is about brute force, stamina, and learning how to swing a heavy, often unwieldy piece of sharpened metal without chopping off your own foot. You'll be practicing with swords, axes, maces, and lances, often against a quinton, a rotating dummy that would gleefully whack you with a sandbag if you didn't hit it right. Imagine a very aggressive, uncooperative piñata, and you're close. Hours upon hours are spent on drills, repeating movements until your muscles scream and your male coif feels like it's fused to your skull. Your instructor isn't a gentle mentor. He's probably a grizzled veteran with a vocabulary limited to grunts, curses, and threats involving your noble lineage. He'll push you until you're about to collapse, then push you some more, because in battle, exhaustion is a death sentence. Jousting practice is another charming pastime. This isn't just about looking dashing with a long pointy stick. It's about learning to control a charging warhorse, aim a 12-foot lance at a tiny target, your opponent's shield or worse, his head, and absorb the bone-jarring impact of a collision, all while trying not to fall off and land on your head like an overturned turtle. Splinters from shattered lances fly like shrapnel. Bruises are a given. Broken bones are common. And if your opponent's lance connects squarely, you might find yourself launched out of your saddle with enough force to question all your life choices. Then there's the pell, a sturdy wooden post that you attack with your sword as if it personally insulted your mother. This is about building strength, accuracy, and the ability to keep swinging even when your arms feel like lead. You'll hit it, and hit it, and hit it, until the rhythmic thud becomes the soundtrack to your aching existence. And let's not forget sparring with other knights. This isn't friendly roughhousing. It's full-contact combat with blunted weapons, but blunted doesn't mean harmless. You're still getting hit with heavy pieces of metal, still risking concussions, broken ribs, and the sheer humiliation of being bested by Sir Geoffrey, who everyone knows cheats. Injuries are frequent and medical care is medieval. A broken bone might be set badly, leading to a permanent limp. A deep cut could fester, leading to amputation or a slow, agonizing death from infection. There are no sterile bandages, no antibiotics, just a prayer and maybe some dubious herbs. So, as you wipe the sweat, and possibly blood, from your brow after another grueling training session, remember that this isn't for glory, it's for survival. Every aching muscle, every bruise, every near-death experience in the practice yard is just preparation for the real thing, which, believe me, is a whole lot worse. You're not a hero in training. You're a piece of military hardware being brutally calibrated. So you've survived another day of being hammered, literally and figuratively, in the training yard. Your body is a symphony of aches. Your armor smells like a damp badger. And your noble steed has probably eaten your spare gauntlet. Surely now it's time for some sophisticated courtly pursuits. Some witty repartee with elegant ladies. Some of that chivalry you've read about in poems? Prepare for another dose of soul-crushing disappointment, my friend, because courtly life, for your average knight, is less Camelot chic and more damp castle drudgery with a side of political backstabbing. If you're lucky enough to be attached to a lord's household, your evenings might involve standing around in a drafty great hall, trying to look imposing while your stomach rumbles and your feet ache. The romance of chivalry? That was mostly poetry, written by people who didn't have to wear 50 pounds of metal in a room heated by a single smoky fireplace. In reality, courtly love often meant composing awkward poems for a lady who was probably already married to someone far more powerful than you, and who might just get you into a deadly feud if her husband misinterpreted your lovesick sonnet about her eyes like captured stars, which were probably just reflecting the flickering tallow candles. Your interactions with ladies of the court, if they happen at all, are governed by a complex set of rules that you're constantly in danger of breaking. Say the wrong thing, use the wrong fork, if forks even exist yet where you are, or bow too low or not low enough, and you could find yourself the subject of ridicule or, worse, a formal complaint to your lord. The elegant conversations you imagined? More likely, you're listening to your lord drone on about his hunting exploits, or trying to make small talk with other knights who are just as bored and uncomfortable as you are. And the castle itself? Not the gleaming fortress of legend. It's cold, damp, and poorly lit. Sanitation is a word that hasn't been invented yet. The rushes on the floor are changed maybe twice a year, and underneath them lies a fascinating archaeological record of spilled food, dog droppings, and lost buttons. The garderobes we mentioned earlier? They vent directly outside, meaning the castle often has a distinctive aroma, especially on a warm day. Privacy is non-existent. You're likely sharing your sleeping quarters not just with other knights, but also with their squires, various servants, and a healthy population of rodents and insects. The tapestries you see in museums? Those were practical, designed to keep out some of the cold, not just for decoration. And they probably smelled of mildew and ancient dust. Then there's the political intrigue. Courts are hotbeds of gossip, alliances, and betrayals. Every smile might hide a dagger, every friendly gesture a calculation. You need to navigate these treacherous waters carefully, lest you offend the wrong person and find your career, or your life, suddenly cut short. Your lord expects loyalty, but what if his rivals offer you a better deal? What if the king himself takes an interest in your affairs? These are not abstract concerns. They are daily calculations for survival. So, as you stand there in your slightly less dented armor, trying to make your pottage last, remember that the chivalric ideal is mostly a myth. Courtly life is a complex, uncomfortable, and often dangerous game, and you're just a pawn in it, albeit a heavily armed one. The real adventure isn't slaying dragons. It's surviving dinner without causing an international incident. After a long day of being a human target, a mobile anvil, and a pawn in the great game of feudal politics, you're probably famished. And tonight, joy of joys, your lord is hosting a feast. Visions of roasted swans, overflowing goblets of wine, and tables groaning under the weight of culinary delights dance in your head. Well, prepare to have those visions replaced by the grimmer reality of medieval gastronomy, where feast often meant slightly more food than usual, with a higher chance of food poisoning. Let's start with the ambience. The great hall is packed. It's noisy, smoky from the torches and the central hearth, if there's no chimney, which is likely, and filled with the aroma of unwashed bodies, wet dogs, who are often allowed to roam freely, snatching scraps, and food that's been sitting out for a while. You're seated at a long trestle table, probably on a hard wooden bench, elbow to elbow with other knights, retainers, and assorted hangers on. Your rank determines how close you are to the Lord's high table, and therefore how good the food and wine are likely to be. If you're down at the far end, you're getting the leftovers and the dregs. Table manners are, shall we say, robust. You'll likely be eating with your fingers or a personal knife. Forks are a suspicious Italian invention that haven't really caught on. You might share a drinking cup with your neighbor. Spitting on the floor is generally acceptable, as is tossing bones to the dogs. It's less Downton Abbey and more frat party with plague rats. The food itself can be a mixed bag. Yes, there might be roasted meats, boar, venison, mutton, often heavily spiced to disguise the fact that they might be a bit past their prime. But you'll also encounter pies filled with unidentifiable contents, pottages of mysterious origin, and bread that's still hard enough to knock out a charging peasant. Vegetables are scarce, often boiled into oblivion. Fruit is seasonal and probably bruised. And everything is cooked over open fires, meaning it's either charred on the outside and raw on the inside, or just uniformly smoky. Presentation can be elaborate. Peacocks might be roasted and then redressed in their feathers. Intricate sculptures made of sugar or marzipan, if you're at a very wealthy lord's table, might adorn the spread. But don't let the fancy presentation fool you. The underlying ingredients are still subject to the whims of medieval food preservation, which mostly involved salt, smoke, or wishful thinking. And the wine is probably young, rough, and served in copious quantities. This leads to the other charming aspect of medieval feasts: drunkenness. As the evening wears on and the wine flows, things can get rowdy. Arguments break out, old feuds resurface, and what started as a noble gathering can quickly devolve into a drunken brawl. Sir Reginald might decide your helmet looks better on his head, or Sir Geoffrey might take offense at the way you're eyeing his trencher of bread. And then there's the aftermath. With no refrigeration and questionable hygiene standards in the kitchen, food poisoning is a constant threat. That suspicious-looking meat pie, it might be your last. The rich sauces? Perfect breeding ground for bacteria. You might wake up the next day not with a hangover, but with a violent case of dysentery, which in the medieval world is often a one-way ticket to the afterlife. So, as you politely or not so politely gnaw on a greasy drumstick, remember that a medieval feast is a gamble. You might get a decent meal, or you might get a week of agonizing intestinal distress. It's all part of the thrilling, unpredictable, and often unsanitary adventure of being a knight. Bon appetit, and may the odds be ever in your favor. So, you've miraculously survived the feast without contracting a fatal case of the medieval trots or getting into a wine-fueled duel over the last piece of slightly off venison. You're probably dreaming of grand quests, dragon-slaying expeditions, or at the very least, a bit of heroic bandit bashing. The reality of a knight's adventures, however, is usually far more mundane and significantly less glamorous. Forget dragons. Your most formidable foe is likely to be boredom. For much of your career, your quests will involve tedious, soul-crushingly dull duties like guard duty. Yes, you, the shining beacon of chivalry, will spend countless hours standing at a castle gate, or pacing a drafty parapet, staring into the middle distance and trying not to fall asleep in your armor. The most excitement you might experience is chasing away a stray pig or challenging a particularly bold-looking pigeon. Then there are escort missions. This sounds vaguely adventurous, but it usually means accompanying a slow-moving procession of merchants, pilgrims, or your lord's boring cousin to some equally boring destination. You're basically an over-armored, underpaid security guard, responsible for ensuring that a caravan of slightly valuable goods or mildly important people doesn't get ambushed by the local riffraff. The roads are terrible, muddy tracks in winter, dusty ruts in summer. The inns, if you find any, are flea-bitten hovels with questionable food and even more questionable sleeping arrangements. And the company? Let's just say merchants aren't known for their sparkling conversation about siege tactics. If your lord is feeling particularly ambitious or paranoid, you might be sent on patrol. This involves riding around your lord's lands, looking for signs of trouble, poachers, trespassing peasants from a rival fiefdom, or maybe, if you're really unlucky, actual bandits. But even then, it's mostly just long hours in the saddle, exposed to the elements, eating cold rations, and wishing you were back in that drafty castle. At least there you had a roof, sort of. Occasionally, you might be called upon to deliver a message. This isn't like being a heroic dispatch rider in a war movie. It's you on your expensive horse, carrying a piece of parchment that could get you killed if you fall into the wrong hands, navigating treacherous terrain and suspicious locals, all to deliver a note that probably just says, "Lord Reginald requests the pleasure of your company for yet another tedious feast. And let's not forget keeping the peace." This could mean anything from settling a dispute between two peasants arguing over a runaway chicken to forcibly collecting taxes from reluctant villagers who are already starving. You're not a hero here. You're the heavy, the enforcer, the guy who makes sure the feudal system keeps grinding along, often at the expense of the very people you're theoretically supposed to protect. So, as you saddle up for another day of thrilling non-adventure, remember that the life of a knight is 90% boredom and 10% sheer terror. The poems and songs leave out the endless hours of guard duty, the muddy roads, and the profound existential ennui of realizing your grand destiny mostly involves making sure no one steals the Lord's firewood. But hey, at least your armor looks shiny, right? Assuming the rust hasn't completely taken over. Alright, so you've endured the mind-numbing boredom of guard duty, the questionable delights of medieval feasting, and the sheer agony of simply existing in 50 pounds of poorly ventilated metal. But surely, all this suffering is in preparation for the glorious crucible of combat, the moment where legends are forged and heroes are made, right? Well, let's talk about what actual combat meant for a medieval knight, and prepare for your Hollywood-fueled fantasies to be brutally dismembered. Forget the elegant, choreographed duels you see in movies, where knights trade witty banter between perfectly executed parries. A medieval battlefield was a chaotic, terrifying, and profoundly messy affair. It was less a graceful dance and more a mosh pit of mud, blood, screaming, and the constant, deafening clang of metal on metal. First, there's the sheer terror. You're facing a line of equally terrified, heavily armed men who genuinely want to kill you in a variety of unpleasant ways. Arrows are whizzing past your head, or, if you're unlucky, into the narrow slit of your helmet. Horses are screaming, men are shouting, and the ground is probably slick with mud, gore, and things you'd rather not identify. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird, and your bowels are seriously questioning your career choices. Then there's the armor. Yes, it offers protection, but it also turns you into a slow-moving, easily exhaustible target. Fighting in full plate is like trying to do vigorous aerobics in a sauna while wearing a small car. You overheat quickly. Your vision is restricted. Your movements are clumsy. And if you fall, which is easy to do on uneven, bloody ground, getting back up without assistance is a monumental struggle, during which any enterprising peasant with a pointy stick can ruin your day permanently. The weapons themselves are brutal. Swords are heavy, designed for hacking and crushing rather than delicate fencing. Maces and war hammers can dent even the best plate armor, causing horrific blunt force trauma underneath. Axes can cleave through shield and bone. And then there are polearms, halberds, glaives, and bills, long, nasty implements designed to unhorse knights or find the gaps in their armor with vicious efficiency. Combat is rarely a one-on-one affair. More likely, you're in the thick of a melee, surrounded by enemies and allies alike, swinging desperately, trying to stay on your feet, and hoping that the guy next to you is actually on your side. It's a desperate, claustrophobic scrum where survival often comes down to sheer luck as much as skill. And if you are wounded, medical care on the battlefield is non-existent. If an arrow pierces a gap in your armor, or a sword blow lands true, you're in serious trouble. There are no sterile field dressings, no antibiotics, no skilled surgeons waiting to patch you up. Your best hope is to be dragged off the field by your squire before you bleed out or get trampled. And even then, infection is a massive killer. A seemingly minor wound could fester and kill you days or weeks later in agonizing fashion. Sieges, another charming aspect of knightly life, were no better. You're either stuck inside a besieged castle, slowly starving and dying of disease while catapulted rocks, and sometimes diseased animal carcasses, rain down on you, or you're part of the besieging army, living in a squalid camp, trying to scale walls under a hail of arrows, boiling oil, and rocks, all while battling dysentery and boredom. So, as you stand there, knee-deep in mud, your ears ringing, your armor feeling like a lead coffin, and a man with a very large axe running towards you with unfriendly intent, you might start to realize that glorious combat is a lie. It's a brutal, terrifying, and often fatal business, and the only real reward is surviving to do it all again. You've somehow made it through a battle, or at least a particularly aggressive training session, without becoming a permanent feature of the landscape. You're bruised, battered, possibly bleeding, and your armor now has several new dents that tell exciting stories of near decapitation. Surely now, the rewards of knighthood will start rolling in. Lands, titles, adoring fans, and maybe a lifetime supply of slightly less stale bread? Let's talk about the perks of being a knight, which often feel less like rewards and more like slightly different flavors of suffering. First and foremost, being a knight is expensive. Incredibly, ridiculously expensive. That shiny suit of armor? It costs a fortune, equivalent to a small herd of cattle or several years' income for a peasant. Your warhorse? Another massive investment. And then there are squires to maintain, weapons to upkeep, and the expectation that you'll live a certain lifestyle befitting your noble status. Many knights were land poor, meaning they had the title and the obligations, but not necessarily the wealth to support them. They were constantly in debt, scrambling for patronage, or hoping to win big at a tournament, which was also expensive to enter and carried a high risk of injury or death. So that image of the wealthy, carefree knight? Mostly a fantasy. You're more likely to be a heavily armed dude stressing about his mortgage. Then there are the chronic injuries. Years of training, jousting, and actual combat take a toll on the body. Badly healed fractures, arthritic joints, missing teeth, and impressive scars are the knight's equivalent of a loyalty program. You might look fearsome, but you probably creak like an old door every time you get out of your straw pallet. Every knight over the age of 30 likely had a collection of aches and pains that would make a modern athlete weep. And let's not forget disease. Medieval life was a petri dish of delightful ailments. Poor sanitation, questionable food, and close living quarters meant that diseases like dysentery, typhus, influenza, and various skin infections were rampant. And while your armor might protect you from a sword blow, it does absolutely nothing against a determined bacterium. A simple cold could turn into pneumonia, and pneumonia was often a death sentence. Battlefield wounds, as we've discussed, were invitations for infection. Gangrene was a common and horrific way to go. Even a splinter could kill you if it got infected. The glory you were promised? It's often fleeting and highly subjective. For every knight whose deeds were sung by minstrels, there were thousands who toiled in obscurity, died unremarkably, and were quickly forgotten. Your great heroic charge might be remembered as, "That time Sir Reginald tripped over a root and got captured." And if you do achieve some renown, it just means you're a bigger target for rivals or enemies. So, as you count your meager earnings, nurse your aching back, and try to ignore that weird rash developing under your arming doublet, remember that the rewards of knighthood are often intangible, uncomfortable, and potentially fatal. You don't get a pension plan or dental coverage. You get scars, debts, and the dubious honor of being slightly more important than a peasant, but probably not by much in the grand cosmic scheme of things. Enjoy your privilege. After a lifetime which, for a knight, might not be very long of enduring discomfort, danger, and questionable medieval cuisine, you might be hoping for a heroic end. Perhaps dying valiantly in battle, defending the innocent, or expiring gracefully in your castle surrounded by weeping admirers and a choir of angelic minstrels. Well, the reality of a knight's final chapter is, once again, likely to be a profound disappointment and probably quite smelly. Let's be clear. Dying in a blaze of glory on the battlefield was relatively rare. While combat was certainly a leading cause of knightly demise, it often wasn't the dramatic one-on-one duel you imagine. More likely, you'd succumb to a random arrow, a mace to the back of the head in the chaos of a melee, or simply bleed out from an untended wound while no one was paying attention. Or you might get trampled by a panicked horse, your own, or someone else's. not exactly the stuff of epic poems. Even if you survived the battle itself, the aftermath was often more dangerous. Infection, as we've repeatedly emphasized because it was just that common and deadly, was the medieval knight's grim reaper. A seemingly minor cut, a puncture wound from a dirty spear tip, or a broken bone piercing the skin could lead to a slow, agonizing death from sepsis, gangrene, or tetanus. You'd spend your final days feverish, delirious, and probably stinking to high heaven, with your comrades politely trying to avoid your sickbed. Then there are the less heroic ways to go. Disease, the great equalizer, claimed countless knights. Dysentery from contaminated water or food, typhus from lice, your constant companions. Pneumonia from exposure and damp living conditions. These were far more common killers than a dragon's fiery breath. You could be a renowned warrior, felled not by a worthy opponent, but by a particularly aggressive bowel infection. Accidents were also frequent. Falling from your horse during a hunt or a tournament could lead to a broken neck or a fatal head injury. A mishap during training, a poorly maintained weapon, even a slip on a rickety castle staircase could spell your doom. Knights weren't immune to the mundane dangers of medieval life. And what if you actually managed to live to something resembling old age? Don't expect a comfortable retirement. You'd likely be riddled with old injuries, arthritis, and failing eyesight. Your golden years would be spent in a drafty castle, probably impoverished if you hadn't managed your finances well, and largely ignored by the younger generation of knights who now considered you a relic. Your legacy? Unless you were exceptionally famous or powerful, you'd be a footnote, if that. Your armor would be sold or passed down, your name perhaps briefly mentioned in a local chronicle, and then silence. The grand tapestries and stirring ballads were reserved for a select few, often heavily embellished by poets eager to please a patron. For most knights, their end was as unglamorous as their beginning. Cold, uncomfortable, and largely unremarked upon. So, as you face your final moments, whether on a muddy battlefield or in a flea-ridden sickbed, try to find some solace in the fact that you survived as long as you did. It wasn't glorious, it wasn't romantic, but it was medieval. And honestly, surviving that at all is a minor miracle in itself.